broadcast tonight. In the wake of the 3 suspected North Korean drones recently discovered, South Korea's defense minister orders tighter vigilance against new security threats. U.S. sticks up for Japan amid a dispute with China over historical and territorial issues, while South Korea, a country also mired in a diplomatic row with Japan, tightens its bond with Beijing. Plus, a promising lead in the search for the missing Malaysian airliner. A U.S. Navy ship detects possible black box signals. These stories and more next on Primetime News. Good evening to our viewers in Korea, and hello to those of you who are watching from around the world. It's Monday, April 7th here in Seoul. I'm Yoo Ji-hye.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. We begin this evening on Seoul's defense front, the discovery of 3 drones in less than a month, which are most likely thought to be sent from the north, has South Korea on high alert.
The Defense Ministry called for tighter vigilance against new threats. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Kim Hyun-bin reports.
Key commanders from every branch of the military held an emergency meeting Monday to discuss the recent infiltrations of unmanned aerial vehicles. Defense Minister Kim Kwang-jin, who led the meeting, urged all the military to be at the ready for any threat out of Pyongyang. Kim emphasized that the 3 drones found in South Korea in recent days were for surveillance purposes, but warned that future ones may be used to carry out attacks. North Korea has hundreds of unmanned aerial vehicles in its possession, so there could very well be more found in South Korea in the coming days and weeks. The South Korean military says it's well equipped to deal with enemy jet incursions and attack UAVs, but adds that it's much more difficult to detect these types of UAVs, which are very small in size. Seoul says it plans to purchase low-altitude radar and other military gadgetry to prevent further infiltrations. Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff said it will take strong actions over Pyongyang's violation of its airspace, and will also mobilize units across the country to search for other drones. A 3rd drone was found on a mountain in Samcheok, Gangwon province, and was reported to the military authorities last Friday. Initial investigations show that drone is the same model as the one that crashed in Paju late last month. It is a worry, as the South Korean military failed to detect these ones until they crashed on South Korea's soil. The ministry says if the drones are confirmed to have come from the north, it will put Pyongyang in clear violation of not only the Korean Armistice Agreement, but also of an international agreement that forbids flying over another country's airspace without prior notification. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
The top nuclear envoys of South Korea, the United States, and Japan will hold a meeting in Washington on this Monday.
A separate one-on-one between Seoul and Tokyo could also take place on the sidelines. Shin Se-min has the details.
The newly appointed South Korean envoy to the 6-party talks, Hwang Jun-guk, is in the U.S. Capitol for talks with his American and Japanese counterparts on drawing up countermeasures and preventive steps to deal with North Korea's latest provocations. According to South Korean officials, Hwang is scheduled to meet with Washington Special Envoy Glenn Davies and Japanese Foreign Ministry Director General Junichi Hara on Monday. Speaking to reporters upon his arrival in Washington, Hwang said the talks are designed to reaffirm coordination among the 3 nations in regards to further provocative acts by North Korea. The South Korean officials also hinted that there might be a chance for a bilateral meeting with Tokyo's chief nuclear envoy, something that didn't happen the last time the 3 countries met in this format last November. If the meeting is held, it'll reflect South Korea's push for strengthening security partnership with Japan, despite a number of unsolved territorial and historical disputes. Hwang said it would be, quote, unnatural for the nuclear envoys of neighboring countries not to meet. Any talks that might occur would center on the North Korean nuclear threat, and Hwang said Seoul could not rule out the possibility that Pyongyang will make good on its threat to conduct a 4th nuclear test. At the United Nations headquarters Friday, North Korea's deputy ambassador to the UN, Lee Dong-il, repeated that threat. He said Pyongyang would carry out a new form of nuclear test to protect itself from the U.S., which he says is, quote, hell-bent on regime change. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
The United States, which has been navigating disputes between Japan and China for decades now, is in the latest one sticking up for Tokyo.
The two Asian nations are in the middle of a diplomatic row over historical and territorial issues. Our foreign affairs correspondent Hwang Sung-hee reports.
The United States is siding with Japan in a dispute with China that's brewing over historical and territorial issues. And the biannual Western Pacific Naval Symposium next month is shaping up as center stage. China has invited all participating nations to take part in an international fleet review where they can parade their ships, with one exception, Japan. Washington has said no American ships will sail if no Japanese ships do. This is not the first time the U.S. has been drawn into the escalating diplomatic row between Japan and China. Late last year, China sparked a trans-Pacific uproar by declaring an air defense identification zone, giving itself the right to identify and take military action against aircraft near the Japan-controlled Senkaku Island, which is also claimed by China. Washington defied Beijing by sending military planes into the zone unannounced. In another sign of support for Japan, U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel welcomed Tokyo's push for collective self-defense by altering its war-renouncing constitution. Hagel said Sunday in Tokyo that Japan was playing a proactive role in contributing to global and regional peace and stability. Whether Hagel will address the fleet review issue during his visit in Beijing remains unclear, but experts say China may not want Japanese warships in its waters because of Japan's occupation of China during the Second World War. Amid the regional spat, South Korea, a country also mired in a diplomatic dispute with Japan, is tightening its bond with China. According to sources Monday, Seoul's Financial Supervisory Service Governor Choi Soo-hyun met his Chinese counterpart in Beijing last week and agreed to bolster financial cooperation. In the past, South Korea had maintained closer economic ties with Japan. The two neighbors will also conduct a joint study of Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of women through historical documents preserved in China. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Everything goes according to plan, Korea will have a leaner fighting.
Your gateway to the day's biggest stories in Korea and around the world. Breaking news, the hottest interviews, and a whole lot more. Join Arirang's Sean Lim and Yoo Ji-hye from the heart of Seoul. Primetime news, weeknights, live at 10 on Arirang TV.
Next general elections.
Over at the National Assembly, Korea's Finance Minister Hyun Oh-seok was on the hot seat as lawmakers grilled him over the latest string of data leaks to hit the nation in recent months. Our political correspondent Kim Young-gil has more on the third day of the parliamentary interpellation session.
Protecting the public's personal information was at the top of the agenda during Monday's Assembly session. Both ruling and main opposition party lawmakers asked whether proper measures had been taken in light of 3 massive leaks of private data this year alone, including the nation's largest ever in January.
Finance officials assured us that secondary data leaks did not happen. But in March, the 3 credit card firms confirmed that more than 83 million cases of client data were leaked to a third party. What do you make of this?
I give my sincere apologies to the people, but the secondary data leaks did not include the client's credit card passwords or their CVC codes. It is impossible to forge credit cards without the two.
Hyun said the government released interim measures in March that strengthened data protection, which include closer monitoring of voice phishing or smishing scams. Final contingency plans will be announced in the first half of the year. Lawmakers from the opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy took aim at President Park's deregulation drive, saying it threatens to undermine the economy.
There are good regulations and bad regulations. There are regulations that need to be lifted to stimulate the economy. However, President Park Geun-hye is trying to do away with too many.
The government is trying to use deregulation as a tool to stimulate the economy by promoting investment and creating jobs. Our objective is to remove excessive red tape that may hinder business activities.
Lawmakers also mentioned Korea's alarming household debt problem, which hit a record $950 billion as of the end of last year. At the hearing, the government said it is doing all it can to help low-income debtors handle loan repayments from government funding programs. However, some lawmakers demanded that the government devise more concrete measures to deal with combined debt held by households, companies, and government organizations. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Real estate accounts for about 70% of household assets in Korea, and the figure is setting off alarm bells as price cuts in the housing market could have a devastating impact on people's financial health and, in turn, the economy. Hwang Ji-hye has this report.
The ratio of non-financial assets to all assets in Korean households is among the highest in the world. Statistics Korea data shows that the ratio was over 70% last year, far above the United States. Real estate assets in particular accounted for around 68% of those held by Korean households, down almost 2 percentage points from 2012. That, however, represents the biggest chunk. Experts say real estate is pursued because it's a profitable and stable investment outlet. But they also caution that an asset structure that leans too heavily on property could have a devastating impact on household finances.
Ratio of real estate assets are especially high among the elderly, and when property prices go down, they will have less money to spend for their years after retirement.
The experts add that there's a high possibility the nation's property prices will fall since Korean households will likely start selling their real estate to secure a stable source of income after retirement. They advise people to diversify their assets and make the best out of pension funds that allow people to secure loans based on the properties they have mortgaged. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Overseas orders for South Korea's industrial plants surged from a year earlier in the first 3 months of this year on the back of increased orders from Africa and the Middle East. The Trade Ministry says overseas orders for the first quarter amounted to $16.8 billion, a spike of 42% from the same period last year. Government efforts to make it easier for local firms to go abroad are getting the credit for the surge. The growth was especially pronounced in Africa, where orders jumped more than 40-fold. The government's goal is to boost annual overseas orders to over $70 billion this year for the first time ever. Today, April 7th, marks the Internet's symbolic birth date, and to look forward to where the technology is headed, we bring in Dr. Munz Hongchun, professor of business at the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. Welcome.
Hi.
Professor Moon, it's been decades since web came out. Who made them possible? Can you walk us through the brief history of the Internet?
Yeah, the Internet was invented 45 years ago, and it was made easier for ordinary people to use, 25 years ago. And the first 20 years, it was very difficult to use. Even the very smart expert can use. It is the Mr. Tim Berners-Lee who invented the home page. We simply call it web, but it is homepage in reality.
Is that how we transitioned from an internet that was relatively closed to one that it is globally accessible as we know now? And are there functionalities that we take for granted?
The internet was very difficult to use, but the functionality of internet is the same. It hasn't been changed. Only how to use it is different. So functionality is the same.
Now, looking forward to the future now, pundits say 5G and the Internet of Things, the IoT, will drive the future evolution of the Internet itself. Now, what are they and why do we need them?
Yeah, to understand the difference between 4G and 5G, you can think of the 4G as a road that has only 10 lanes. 10 lanes each, back and forth. But 5G is about 1,000 lanes each. So that's 100 times difference. And, many more things will be connected in the future, and many more things will be digitized in the future. For example, the black box. You see the Malaysia airline black box. The black box is analog. It should be made digital. And making black box in the ship and aircraft by digital is through internet.
Which IT companies are setting the trends in 5G?
5G, that's Samsung and Sony. So that's because of the Olympic. The Korea will host Winter Olympic in 2018. And 2 years later, which is 2020, there will be Tokyo Summer Olympic. So Korean companies and Japanese companies are very eager to show their position as a first mover and trendsetter in the world.
So which company should we look out for when it comes to developing the IoT technology?
That's definitely Google. Google is more than trendsetter. Google invest about the $5 billion in a couple of weeks recently. And the Google acquired Nest Lab, the company which controls the room temperature in living room and each room. And Google also acquired Oculus, which is more than Google Glass as of today. The Oculus is a kind of a three-dimensional display about this size. And once the person who wears Oculus watches some object in front, then the details of the object are displayed in half a second from Google database. So that's the idea of the IoT, and the Google is more than trendsetter, and every other company is very confused and very anxious about how to follow Google at the moment.
All right. Well, Professor, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much.
It's time to check on some of the stories making headlines on the global front with our Paul Lee at the News Center.
Paul, let's start with a hopeful sign in the search for the missing Malaysia airliner. What's the latest with these pings?
Well, investigators leading the search say they've come across their most promising lead yet. An Australian Navy ship has detected news signals that are consistent with those emitted from aircraft black boxes. But time is not on their side. Our Connie Kim reports.
It could be the break investigators have been seeking out for 1 month now in their search for Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. 2 separate signals were detected by the Australian vessel known as Ocean Shield over the weekend.
Clearly, this is a most promising lead. And probably in the search so far, it's probably the best information that we have had.
Houston said the first signal picked up in the Indian Ocean lasted for about 2.5 hours and the second one for about 13 minutes. Officials said the pings were consistent with those emitted by aircraft black boxes. While optimistic about the discovery, Houston was quick to tamp down expectations. He said further confirmation was needed as the sounds were heard from a depth of 4,500 meters. The search team plans to lower Bluefin 21, Ocean Shield's underwater autonomous vehicle, once they can pinpoint a more exact location for the signals. But officials say it'll take days to confirm whether the pings were from the missing aircraft. The most pressing issue now is time. The search entered its 31st day on Monday, and the batteries of the black box are feared to run out any day now if they haven't already. There are currently 12 aircraft and 14 ships taking part in search operations, but severe weather conditions in the South Indian Ocean are in the forecast, making their jobs even more difficult. Flight 370, carrying 239 people, is believed to have gone down in the Indian Ocean sometime on March 8th. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Moving now to the latest scene of civil unrest in Ukraine. Pro-Russian groups have taken over key government buildings in the eastern part of the country. Interim Ukrainian President Oleksandr Turchinov has called an emergency meeting of his security chiefs to deal with this fresh crisis and canceled a visit to Lithuania. Police and pro-Russian protesters clashed on Sunday in 3 eastern Ukrainian cities, demanding a Crimea-style referendum. Thousands of demonstrators seized regional government buildings, chanting Russia and raising Russian flags. Meanwhile, in Kiev, Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk is accusing Moscow of orchestrating the unrest as part of a plan to send troops across the border. And over now to India, where the country has kicked off the world's largest elections. Some 815 million Indians will be eligible to cast their votes through next month. That's 100 more than during the last elections held in 2009. The polls to elect members of the country's lower house of parliament will take place in 9 phases over the next 5 weeks. The first phase is already underway in the northeastern states of Assam and Tripura. Polls released Sunday night show that the ruling Congress Party, led by the Nehru Gandhi dynasty, is likely to take a hit over India's prolonged economic slowdown. Meanwhile, the Bharatiya Janata Party, led by Hindu nationalist leader Narendra Modi, is forecast to win the largest number of parliamentary seats. Voting will continue through May 12th, but the ballots won't be completely counted until May 16th. And speaking of elections, Hungary just wrapped up theirs. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has declared victory in Sunday's parliamentary election, winning a second consecutive term. With nearly all the ballots counted, election officials have projected Orban's ruling center-right party would win over two-thirds of the 199 seats in parliament.
This was not just an odd victory. We have scored such a comprehensive victory, the significance of which we cannot yet fully grasp tonight.
Projections also saw the center-left opposition alliance trailing with 39 seats, while the far-right Jobbik party would take 25. That wraps up our look at international stories making headlines around the world. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Hello and welcome to Primetime Sports. I'm Stephen Che. Well, it's always difficult for an athlete to retire from the sport they love. And after almost 2 decades, South Korean speed skater Lee Kyu-hyuk has officially hung his skates up for good. He had officially said that the Sochi Olympics would be his last and held a ceremony in Seoul to make it official. He made it to 6 Olympic Games since 1994, the most for a South Korean, but did not win a medal, coming as close as 4th at Torino in 2006. He said despite not winning one, he was grateful for the opportunity and gained so much from it all. Still, he retires with 4 sprint world titles, as well as having inspired the new generation of skaters in Korea. And heading to the greens, 19-year-old American Lexi Thompson beat out the field at the Kraft Nabisco Championship for her first major win. She surged in the final round to end at 14 under par, 3 shots higher than Michelle Wie. Meanwhile, for the men, Matt Jones won the Shell Houston Open for his first PGA victory, earning himself a ticket to the Masters tournament opening on Thursday this week. And taking a look at Formula One, Lewis Hamilton took the checkered flag at the Bahrain Grand Prix for his second win so far this season. Mercedes teammate Nico Rosberg came in second yet again, like at the Malaysia GP, putting on display Mercedes' dominance in the first 3 races in 2014. Meanwhile, Rosberg, who won the opening race in Australia, still has an 11-point lead over Hamilton on the overall standings. And over in the NBA, Kevin Durant is having a career for the ages, having just broken one of Michael Jordan's prolific scoring records. In the Oklahoma City Thunder's 122-115 loss to the Phoenix Suns on Sunday, Durant scored 38 points for his 41st consecutive game, with more than 25 points scored. Now everything's clicking for the 3-time scoring champion, who's now led his team to 4 straight division titles since 2011. And ending off with England, or rather in England with Premier League action, Liverpool has returned to the top of the standings after a 2-1 win over West Ham on Sunday. Steven Gerrard's 2 successful penalties led to the win, giving Liverpool a 2-point lead over Chelsea, who thrashed Stoke City 3-0 on Saturday. Man City, meanwhile, is still in contention for the title as well, sitting just 4 points back with 5 fixtures remaining. And that's all I have for now. This has been Stephen Che. I'll see you back here later for more from the world of sports.
Today was a mild spring day with clear skies, which was a welcome relief after the cold snap we had over the weekend.
That's right. For more, let's turn things over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung.
Good evening, guys. Well, more good news that tomorrow looks to be another moderate spring day. But as for now, a dry weather warning has been issued in some parts of the country, including Gyeonggi-do province. Keep in mind that the dry conditions and strong winds may lead to forest fires. Temperatures will continue to rise, leading to warmer than the seasonal average weather towards the end of this week, and otherwise light drizzles are forecast to fall from Saturday night through Sunday morning. Currently, due to a high pressure front, we're seeing clear skies across the nation. On Tuesday, average daytime highs will peak from between 18 to 24 degrees, so make sure to soak up some spring sunshine. As for Tuesday's readings, Seoul tops out at 19 degrees, while Daegu and Gwangju make it to the mid-20s. Moving on to other regions, Jeju peaks at 18 degrees, while Dokdo and Mount Kumgang reach the mid-teens. Well, that's all the updates for this hour, but I'll be back with more after midnight.
Thanks, Bo-kyung. And that's a broadcast on this Monday night. I'm Yoo Tae-hae in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.